Welcome back. Episode 6, How to Program in C++, Beginner Series. Last time we did a project, built a little calculator. As you can see, there's a lot of repeating code, so this is a perfect time to introduce functions. One of the main points of functions is to be able to take areas of your code where you replicate things and only do it once, following a rule called dry. So, functions. And what does dry mean? It's an acronym for do not repeat yourself. Or I guess it would be don't. So that's what yourself. So that's what dry stands for. It's a common vernacular here among programmers. If you're typing the same thing over and over, kind of like I guess these sections right here. You see it here. See it here. So we could just have a function that handles these replicating lines of code. So to make a function, well, if you're doing it all in one file, you first want to have up at the top, well, you can declare your whole function up here. And remember, this int main is a function too. It's just the entry point. So when you're compiling and running your program, it always looks for that. But if you want to make your own function, first you put in the return type. If it has no return type, it's void. And then the name of your function, we'll call it get entries for now. And then in parentheses, and these are the variables you pass in. So if you end it here, it is just a, what do they call it? Forward declare, I believe. A forward declaration of it so that your program recognizes it. So if you do it this way, you have to once again, I don't know how to open that, I'm going to take Control C. You got to go below your main, type it again, except this time instead of the semicolon, you want to do brackets, and this is where you define what it actually does with just more code. And if it has a return type, you need a return of whatever it is at the end, but since this is void, it's not going to return anything. But we want to just take this section here and put it in here. And that way we can just call get entries, and at this section of the code anytime that way we're not repeating that same 4 lines. It's going to save us some lines of code. However, this divide one is a little different, so it's not necessarily where, you know, not a full repeat right there. But you know what we could do is we could modify this a little bit, and I suppose we'll do that. We'll do get entries, and we'll do this check again, except we'll just put this here. It's just going to prompt for the first number again too. So we'll get rid of this, but it's still going to do this check on the second number and replicate. It's just going to prompt for both now. So that sort of cuts it down a little bit. But this function does not know about first number and second number because these are declared within the scope of this main and then within this while loop. So these would have to be, there's 2 different ways I can think of off the top of my head here to do this. You could either make these global, which means you put them up here, and that way everything in the file knows about them. But you typically don't want to do globals. I mean, you can. It's not going to hurt anything in this small case. But if we want to kind of keep it how it was, I can show you a little more about functions. So we can say that this get entries will take in some variables to change. And now I'll try to go over this quickly and also accurately, but there's kind of a lot to pass in variables. So first of all, they need a type and a name. We'll just make it first, and then a float second. But when they're just like this, in this plain way, it passes them as a copy. So you wouldn't be actually modifying this number that you're passing in, you'd be modifying the copy or working with the copy. So what you need to do instead is pass by reference, and you do that with an ampersand in between them. So this passes by reference, which means it's a reference to the variable. It is the actual variable that you're passing in when you're working on it, and that way the changes we make to it are essentially saved when we continue down in our program. Now often when things are a reference, you'll see that the user will have const in front of it, which means you cannot change these. And that's an efficient way to pass in variables because you're passing a reference to it rather than making a copy. So it uses less memory and it makes sure it doesn't get edited. But in our case, we do want to edit them because we're doing a cn to change them. And as you notice, the name is changed, but it is referencing the same variable. And we just have to be sure to actually pass those in here. So this here is calling the function. So we'll just go ahead and do that. And now our program should work exactly as before, except now we're doing it, oops, now we're doing it with a function rather than typing the same code over and over. So I'll go ahead and compile this with g++ main.cpp, and we will run it. And we get the same thing as last time. But now when we do divide, we enter the second number as 0. It's going to start from the first number because it just starts over and runs this again. So that is a very basic version of a function. As we go forward, I'll continue making functions and you'll see some other things you can do with them. And one of the points of passing by reference is when you need to return multiple things. You'll see this often. Like if we were just returning or getting one number, we could just return a float, and in here we could have it get the float and return it. And that would kind of be a different story. But since we need two of them and we can only return one thing, that's why I'm doing it by reference. Now, it's important to know that there are other ways to return multiple numbers, such as you could put them in an array or in a vector. By doing include vector, you can use vectors. And as we go forward, we'll get more advanced. Hope you enjoyed this quick episode on functions, and thanks for sticking with it. Good on you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Keep coding.